Hello there, gentle people, and welcome back to a very special episode of the It's Not Always Dark podcast. I'm your host, Kieran.
And I'm your other host, Erin. And today we have our first guest. Woo!
Hello.
What? We have the lovely Katie Spence of Katie Spence Audio here with us today. Katie, do you want to tell us just a tiny bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, favourite colour?
Of course. So, favourite colour is black. But I am the editor for It's Not Always Dark podcast. Mm-hmm. I'm an audio engineer. I do things like podcasts, music, game audio, a little bit of everything, really. That's just me.
Yeah.
Jack of all trades.
You do a whole bunch. Katie is the person that I go to. I'm just like, Katie, this has happened and I need you to fix it audio-wise. And Katie goes, okay. She does a big sigh and goes, what have you done this time? And says, okay.
All
and we love her
really
for
is
that.
Just Google on your behalf. That's all I do.
Yeah. Me being too scared to Google
another
myself.
person to do that.
Yeah. But you also did sound design at uni, didn't you?
I did. My main project at the end of uni was sounds for sleep. So I'm well versed in all sorts of natural sounds for sleep and ambiences in general.
Which is good because today's podcast topic is ASMR, the world of ASMR.
ASMR is one of these fun topics that I have personally been affected by for quite a couple of years now. Like, it's really done a lot to help with my life. I know also it's just so happened that as I started to get into it, it really started to blow up online. I'm not saying I'm the reason it blew up online, but I'm just saying before I listened to it, there was maybe like 100,000 views at most on a video. And now they're like maxing like 25 million. So... might be something to do with it. So today we're going to be discussing all things ASMR, history, future, what we feel about it. But Erin doesn't actually know all too much about ASMR outside of just hearing about it generally.
We just like Erin doesn't know too much. Full stop. Like, end of podcast. Thanks for listening.
Get the outro music. So, Erin, would you like to tell us what it is that you actually know about ASMR before we get started?
So, in my little notes that I've made in my preparation, I have put ASMR to me, I think is like the audible version of oddly satisfying. It's, I hear the word tingles, but in terms of like, I don't necessarily engage with like what is probably like actually ASMR, but I know it's like a sort of like anxiety relieving, helping to sleep, like concentration thing, like brain stuff, the grey matter.
Brain stuff.
I went back and thought about like types of stuff that I use that is maybe like not ASMR but like in the same realm. And I'm like, obviously there's like white noise, which is for babies and people who need to concentrate and that kind of stuff. And then white people, white noise for white people. But I personally, like, if I'm like going to sleep and I need something to like busy my mind, I think that's kind of what it is partially for, just for like filling up the mind space that would otherwise be having anxious thoughts. Maybe that's just me. But I love a little sleep story. I love a little like, I'll put on like a podcast that I'm not really that interested in, but I just put the volume very low. I generally just like think of it as like occupying brain space, the real estate in the mind, just to like forget about the world for a while. That's what I think of it. As an outsider though, I know there's a lot of kind of weirder things that maybe people like. And then there's like whispering. Is mukbang, is that an ASMR thing or is that a separate realm in itself?
No, it's part of ASMR.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard of a few things, but I don't really know much other than that. I'll leave it on oddly satisfying, but for your ears.
I think that's a pretty great like first starting point for people because, you know, there's a lot of varying opinions on how people view ASMR. So for you to go to the sort of oddly satisfying side instead of the alternative, like, oh, it's like ear porn, it's weird, it's strange. Like, I think that's another common place for it to go to. So
Yeah.
I think you're starting off on a good point. Okay, could you please explain to us what ASMR is?
Of course. So ASMR stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. The best way I would say to describe it is when I experienced it a lot as a kid, but I didn't realize that's what it was when I was a kid. So the most like common place that I would experience it as a kid would be when I'm getting my hair cut, and you can feel the scissors on the back of your neck, or the hairdresser will tip your head forward, or now that I'm an adult and I look for places that do scalp massages when they do your shampoo and conditioner, when they give you the head massage, and it's a tingling sensation that starts, or it can start at the top of your scalp, sort of at your crown, and it just feels very pleasant, and then occasionally it can go down your neck and down your back. Yeah, I feel like most people probably experienced it when they were younger, and there was some games, or I guess games that I would play with my friends where I think this is a Scottish thing, and if not a Scottish thing, then very much my hometown thing.
I feel like I know what you're about to do. Like,
it's the game where it's like dot, dot, line, line, spider crawling up your spine.
Up your spine.
Light breeze, tight squeeze, now you've got the shiveries. And I think the shiveries was ASMR. Or the response.
I'd say so. Mm-hmm. I think we had like variants of it where I was from, but I didn't like. There's always just different ways of rhyming things, but the general plot is still to do all this stuff on your back and to create these like weird feelings. Because even at like a young age, we did recognize that something about it felt strange and light, just different than what we're used to. That type of strange.
so is ASMR then the specific sensation that it triggers then, rather than like a genre?
I would say so.
So, because ASMR stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response, it's just the response to these feelings. Like, that's what ASMR means. So, I think that a general misconception is that ASMR is just like the term for what it's called online, but it's actually like a physical response that is just called by those initials because it's an easier way of, finding content.
That's so cool. I didn't know that. There we go. I've learned something already.
ASMR in general hadn't really been researched up until 2015 was when the first papers on ASMR started to get published. There may have been papers before that didn't use the term ASMR, but the first studies to explore ASMR described it as a sensory phenomenon in which individuals experience a tingling, static-like sensation across the scalp, back of the neck, and at times further areas in response to specific triggering audio and visual stimuli. Sensation is widely reported to be accompanied by feelings of relaxation and well-being. And that's David and Barrett in 2015 that stated that.
I feel like even just talking about it, my scalp's going like, ooh.
It's definitely one of those things where we've all felt it from like a young age, and like this stems back because the first person to go on to an online forum, it was like in 2010 was when ASMR was first given like the coin term, but I think the forum post happened in 2007, and it was over time that this community of people responded to the username okay whatever. I love that username. It's just so angsty for 2007. I think the name of the person who had the account was Jennifer Allen, and so she put this post up in 2007 about these sensations, and then from that point onwards it was like a constant response type thing from people that were wanting to figure it out too. I would say that ASMR is one of those things that's always been very community based because of this, these original posts and responses that built up to the point of coining the term autonomous sensory meridian response, which I think's great because it's something that I think's carried on to this day, and it's continued to grow as like a community of people who are just creating content for the same purpose.
The first ever piece of content that was posted deliberately trying to elicit ASMR was in 2009 by a channel called Whispering Life. And at this point, the term hadn't even been coined. Nobody really could put a name to it, I don't think. There was just sort of little forums here and there that were speaking about it. And she described it as weird. And then there was a community of whisperers that were on YouTube between 2009 and 2012, which I love.
Just the whispers.
It just sounds like a coven. Like
It does.
Cult.
A little bit of a cult. Culty vibes.
Another thing that really falls in line with what ASMR is the triggers. So I feel like, unlike the term trigger, I think is used these days to describe when, you know, people are triggered in a negative light. But ASMR, I think, is the one community that really looks at triggers, and it's essentially a bunch of different ways in which you can get this response is by different triggers, which are mostly sound-based, but you have a lot of visual cues as well. I would say that one of the most notable content creators, like you, Whispering Life, true icon, trailblazer, way before our time. But I think Heather Feather is one of the main content creators that I knew of when I started listening to ASMR. Mm-hmm. And she was known for creating what can only be described as this sound, which is a very, when it's repeated over and over and you're listening to it on like earphones, that was one of the first like videos that really got like the back of my head like going all tingly and made me feel some type of way. But I'd say that one of the nice things about the content creators in the community is that because she was like the first one to really publish something with this sound, it kind of became like a trademark of hers. And I'd say even to this day, if people use it, they still like even like link her channel in their description, just because, I don't know, I think it's a little bit of like respect for people in the community that have, you know, maybe been the first ones to publish things and wanting to give credit where it's due, which I think is pretty cool, because we do live in an age where if you do something, someone is trying to do it before you, or if you've done it, they're trying to find a way to take it from you and make it their own, which that's life, you know.
It's just given me very like you know, like any song that Jason Derulo's on, it's like Jason Derulo. So like she's just in the background like like she's here to feature on the track.
I pretty much feel like everyone that was introduced to ASMR was introduced through Heather Feather, because my very first video was like I think it was something like a 15 triggers, and it was different objects, which we'll get into later, but that was definitely my first video as well. And I think there's sort of like this respect in the community for the people that started doing it, I guess, first, like Heather Feather.
Before it became like profitable and whatnot.
Yeah, like Gentle Whispering, I think, is universally regarded as the queen of ASMR. Like,
it's very high priestess, if we're going back to the coven.
Erin, do you want to start a coven by any chance?
The elders. Like someone with a name like Heather Feather definitely has some sort of like dream catcher sitting up somewhere. Like,
her voice is very interesting. I think that's one of the cool things about ASMR is that because everyone's from different like parts of the world, you get like a lot of additional like triggers going on with just accents sometimes. And because of her voice, she's very like light in how she speaks, and almost
very
like
breathy.
I wouldn't say nasal, very breathy, light and breathy, and in a way that she doesn't sound like anyone else.
Even Gentle Whispering, she's originally Russian, so when she speaks English, it was definitely more pronounced earlier on, but she had a really quite a thick Russian accent, and that just seemed to elevate it in a way. I'm not sure.
Yeah. No, it puts you in a really great mindset.
But likewise, I can't listen to Scottish people do ASMR.
that's I was just
like
thinking about like Chav ASMR, or like Bams being like, or like imagine just like Moaning Myrtle does ASMR. Like thinking of her like in that Goblet of Fire scene where she's like in the bath with Harry. Like, the bubbles are nearly gone. Just like whispers it.
I have got like one exception to that, like no Scottish people doing ASMR rule, and it's this one girl who funnily enough, like she was incredibly talented at impersonating like the major content creators. So like she would do these videos where she literally becomes every huge content creator with her voice, and it's so strange to like hear a voice that you associate with one face, but it's not that face anymore because she stole their voice.
So
Very like Ursula the Sea Witch vibes.
are-
Back to witches.
we love a theme, a motif, if you will. But so are the original ASMR people, like the founders of the cult, were they? Sorry, I feel like I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this, but like,
No.
did they like predominantly then? Did it all start with vocal cues and like vocal triggers?
I'd say it might have been a hybrid because I think when you're publishing on like YouTube, there was definitely people that would take their audio and maybe just publish that as it is. But then you had a lot of people that like to appear in front of the camera and put on a little bit of a performance because, we'll get into the triggers in just a little bit. But I mean, one of the major players in the ASMR game is the roleplay side, which sounds... It shares roleplay always sounds like it could be a sexual thing just because that's what it's predominantly known as in our society. But in ASMR terms, like a roleplay is quite literally like you can hold a clipboard and that's a roleplay. Like you're being someone with a position. That's it. And you're in front of the camera.
So like, what does like ASMR actually do? Like, what are the desired effects? What's the aim of the game?
So the feeling of the tingling sensation on your scalp predominantly is called tingles, which I'm not sure if I like the name of, but that's what...
No.
I think it's quite cute. It sounds sparkly.
Yeah, sparkly is a good way to put it. It is. I find it a bit strange. I find it a bit odd. But the main aim of these videos is to provide tingles, but it can also elicit responses of relaxation or focus instead.
I think in like the rare cases, some people... ASMR is not something that works for every type of person. That's why I think it is considered as like a community because not everyone's into it. Some people find that it's quite discomforting. And I know especially like when it comes to things like a mukbang or anything with like a chewing sound, that can really like put a lot of people off ASMR because if that's their first experience with it, it can trigger like misophonia, which is in layman's terms like quite literally just disliking sound. But I think that it's shown that chewing sounds seem to trigger that feeling of misophonia more than any other, but it does just depend.
One of the first articles covering ASMR, the one we mentioned earlier by Barrett and Davis, they explore different triggers such as tapping and slow movements, and they report temporary improvements in symptoms of depression and chronic pain. So as well as providing these tingles that people experience, it can also help relax and therefore ease symptoms associated with these diseases or illnesses.
That's really cool. That's like, I just totally didn't realise that it was so much to do with like a physical sensation, like that it was like seeking a thrill, if you... That's I don't know how to word this better, but like in my head,
A thrill's fair.
like I purely thought that it was like a relax situation, and I know that it is relaxing, but I didn't realise there was like an objective to it. Very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's vast benefits to ASMR. Like Katie's been mentioning, like you can alleviate a lot of stress from it. It provides comfort. It improves sleeping patterns for a lot of people as well. I know that when I was using it at the correct times, I sort of developed a sleeping pattern through ASMR. There's also a study that I looked at in 2017 by Fredberg, Clark and Smith, which basically they looked at the personality characteristics of people who experience ASMR, and they found that the results showed that those who experience it have higher scores on what they like to call the openness to experience scale, which indicates that people who experience ASMR have a greater sensitivity and receptivity to sensations. They also found higher scores on neuroticism, which may be accounted for by a greater degree of depression among the members of the ASMR sample in their little experiment, uh, and would be associated with lower levels of emotional stability. So, just putting that out there. If you like ASMR, you might want to go see the doctor for your emotional stability. um, they also suggested that based on the results that they found that ASMR is associated with specific personality traits, and this may explain why some people experience it more profoundly than others.
I mean, it would make sense, wouldn't it? Because it's sort of like the same vibe as like, not like a lot of people can say that like meditation and stuff like that isn't for them because they don't have the openness or like the almost like the mental presets to be able to sit and meditate. And I guess it's probably like a similar thing, like you have to be open to actually just sitting and letting it happen.
The first time I listened to it, I remember just thinking it was so strange, and I didn't know if I wanted to listen to any more of it. But then, being the open-minded, free-loving person that I am, I decided to keep going, and then I created like this weird sort of habit in life that required ASMR every day. I'd say there's been very few days in my life that I've fallen asleep now since that haven't been like helped in some form or another with just a couple of minutes of looking at like an ASMR video.
Cool. We love a bedtime routine.
Self-care. So when it comes down to looking at the different types of ASMR, we decided to reference using a lot of fun work done by Isabel Imagines, a content creator on YouTube, which she separated into two different forms, personal attention and tingle inducing. So, Katie, could you please explain to us what personal attention triggers are?
Sure. So I think that these categories can be split into two, either tingle inducing or personal attention, by whether the person in the video is addressing and talking to you personally or performing actions on you. Whereas tingle inducing doesn't rely on the person addressing the viewer at all. One of the most common personal attention styles that Isabel mentions in her video is the how-to style. So she says things like watching somebody paint, do makeup, or sort things out, organise things. They often feature whispering, soft-spoken dialogue, and also the sound of the activity itself. And the best, most classic example of this is Bob Ross.
Oh, Bob Ross.
We love
Rest
Bob
in peace,
Ross.
Bob. We miss you.
Bob Ross has often been, I think, referred to as triggering ASMR in people when they were
Way
watching them.
before the topic was going on.
For sure. So the fact that he's addressing you as he's explaining how to paint, and also you hear the brushes on the canvas, I'd say that's probably one of the most classic examples of how to ASMR
I
in
love
existence.
That makes me think of like, I love watching like artist studio vlogs on YouTube. Like people with like small businesses and stuff just like using their crickets and their guillotines, and it really just like, if that's the ASMR, then yes.
That is, you're consuming it without even knowing.
There we go.
So another category that she mentions in her video is spiritual. Now, Erin, I'm pretty sure that you've probably partook in some of this content before, but
I feel
things
very
like
attacked by this.
no, it wasn't a read, I promise.
Okay, I was like, and then you definitely have stones somewhere in your vicinity.
No,
I mean,
but
just think of when you go to yoga.
Yeah.
I mean, so things like hypnosis, mindfulness, guided meditation, positive affirmations, they all could be categorized as spiritual ASMR. They often have some really nice, like, calm sort of ambient music in the background, which sort of adds to it. Very much like what you would get at yoga. Very much like it.
For the listeners who don't know, I'm an avid yoga partaker. I find it very like relaxing, to the extent that I once fell asleep in a yoga class and then snored myself awake. and just had to deal with the consequences of that, like knowing that everyone around me.
This was what, before COVID, so you were in an actual room with other people there as well.
Well, it was when things were kind of open, so like we had to wear a mask to sit down and stuff. So like at the end of the class, I had just like waited until everyone else left. Like I put my mask on and just waited until everyone else left because I couldn't deal with the human interaction of like people knowing that I'd fallen asleep during the yoga class and snored myself awake. Horrific. So embarrassing.
I remember you telling me about that, and it honestly just made me laugh so much that I decided to go and join you for a session of yoga purely for that ending point, which, as someone who's always in the mood to like trigger their ASMR, that was so relaxing. Like it totally makes up for all those like moments of stress, like as you try and like stretch in a way that you've never done before. So I get why they pair the two together, because it's like you do a lot for the body and then you're being mindful of the brain afterwards.
But then it sort of makes sense that I would fall asleep, because I guess I must be using spiritual ASMR to help me fall asleep. Like I do like the sleep stories, as I said, or like a guided body scan and stuff like that.
Like apps such as Headspace and Calm utilize spiritual ASMR so much, but they're not necessarily branded as ASMR, so you may not know that you're consuming that type of content.
Well, the things we've found out today, it turns out I'm really into ASMR and I just didn't even know it. Here I was thinking it was just chewing and whispering.
Now, we're going to move on to probably the most, I would say,
controversial,
popularly recognised part of ASMR, which is role plays. Now, role plays tend to be very heavily focused on personal attention, to the point where they could be quite off-putting for new listeners or watchers, I would say. So some examples that Isabel provided were things like a lice check, like check your hair for nits, a haircut, an ear exam, and then she describes some as innovative as well, which I kind of agree with, such as they can be like fantasy based or historical based. So what would an example be? Like
a ear exam.
Yeah, literally. There's a really good video by, I think it's Whisper Audios, and she does like a historic like 19th century ear exam, and it's incredible. Genuinely,
I feel really
Erin is
triggered
shocked.
hearing.
I just don't know.
I feel triggered in like the negative light just hearing about like a knit story. I think one of the main things that Katie also said before was that there's a lot of innovative styles of roleplay that exist now that I think are just incredible. Like one of my favorite roleplays that I've ever listened to, it's like a space voyage thing where like you're being checked at like a border of space and you're traveling across. She's done so much work like to make this space voyage roleplay work, and like Kate was saying, it's like she's speaking to you and you don't even care that no one's responding, because in your head you're like, yeah, I am traveling to like a third sector of whatever planet she's talking about, because she's like done so much visual effects too with like, I'm gonna assume After Effects or something like that, to make it look very movie-esque.
Go her.
I will say they can be pretty strange and pretty daunting to those who are new to ASMR. I think as well, I think the quality of the video plays a part, because if it's not super high quality, I feel like it can, depending on the style or depending on the genre, I guess, of whatever they're trying to emulate, it can fall sort of into the uncanny valley where it's not quite believable enough that you feel comfortable with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if it's not of a high quality, the immersion is just not there. You just feel a little bit strange watching it.
Yeah, I just heard Uncanny Valley and my mind just like went through the files and brought up Cats the movie, and I'm just trying to like put it back in its drawer quickly before we move on, because
lock the drawer.
I'm just like seeing
Throw
like
away the key.
Things that I should never have been put in the cinema, but
they're all the categories that Isabel had laid out as personal attention. So the other one is tingle inducing.
And tingle-inducing triggers, they range through various different types. So you have like voice triggers, which often the ones that I associate strongly with voice triggers is the type of the Heather Feathers of the world with their or at ASMR requests, like she had the term stipple, which was often associated with like a makeup brush that she would like tap against the camera, and it does so much to make you feel relaxed. You have like object triggers as well, which is where a lot of the tapping comes into play. You then have satisfying videos, which these are a lot of the things you'll see on like your Facebook feed, where it's like someone's made like a sandcastle and they're like slicing through it with a knife.
I
And
love
it just
that.
looks very, very satisfying to the eye. You then have visual triggers, which I think I respond probably the most to these nowadays. They seem to get my eyes like drooping faster than anything else. Like I can't keep my eyes open at a certain stage when I watch these ones. And that's just a lot of like looking at a camera and like brushing and like doing things. I like to compare it to when you go to the optician and they start doing that thing where they're like trying to get you to recognize what side they're doing movement from to test like the range of your eyes.
That's just like brought me right back to like before we started recording when you started talking about the scene from Toy Story 2,
Yeah.
where Woody's getting fixed up, and like that really just like is probably one of the most like satisfying scenes in a film ever. Like the man like getting out his case that like rolls out, and
Yeah.
like him like cleaning Woody's eye with a cotton bud. Lovely.
It sort of links into the other side of visual triggers as well as watching people say get a massage or get their eyes tested or get a haircut.
I think especially these days because everything is so much more tense with COVID, it's really relieving to watch a time where there wasn't COVID, where people could have that type of personal interaction and be tested in those ways without all the precautions in place. So in some sense, it's nice to also use it for that.
Nostalgic.
Nostalgia. Throwback. And then you also have mukbangs, which come under the tingle inducing. Mukbangs are definitely, I think they're like the rogue cousin of the ASMR family because mukbangs are something that I think so the word mukbang, I believe it comes from
It's Korean, right?
Korean, yeah. When it comes to the mukbangs, they can be very ASMR based and softly done and just about the eating sounds. But then you also have like the Trisha Paytases of the world who have very loud videos that you don't necessarily get the same type of tingle inducing triggers from that type of mukbang. And that's just, I guess, appropriation of a mukbang. I don't know.
Like I feel like the term mukbang has been like very much adopted and westernized in the sense that like it really doesn't mean what it actually like originally like started as. Like it's now just like people doing like 10,000 calorie challenges and stuff.
Yeah,
like
God.
Ugh.
I'm pretty sure mukbang started as a way, now please don't quote me on this and I didn't look it up, but I'm pretty sure mukbang started as a way for people to watch somebody eat as they ate their dinner to make them feel less lonely or make them feel like they had a dinner partner in a way.
That's so wholesome.
I'm like 85% positive that is.
I mean, we did just quote you on it, so we'll come back at the end of the episode.
We'll see.
I really like that. See if that's true. That is stunning. I love that.
It's very sweet. It's a nice thought. But it goes hand in hand with when it comes to ASMR, one of the major things that is spoken about it by I think it's Professor David Huron from the University of Ohio. He did like this full piece that kind of touched on ASMR, and what he found was that it's strongly related to the perception of like non-threat and altruistic attention. And this is something that we notice primarily in primates. So monkeys are very much the next case that we look at when it comes to experiencing something like ASMR. Essentially, when you're being groomed and you're getting that type of personal attention, it really does a lot to soothe the soul. It provides a lot of care where you might be lacking it in your life. So for a mukbang to have maybe originated as what it is, to, have an eating partner, I feel like that would really go hand in hand with that whole belief of the primates and that personal attention, because we all require it. We're social beings,
Yeah.
social creatures that require attention.
That's so nice. I love that.
It's also been suggested to me by my university mentor for my final dissertation is that people who had loving and caring families and a good childhood tend to experience or tend to be more open towards ASMR, because it kind of calls back to how your parents would treat you when you were a kid, if that makes sense. So, for example, my mum, when I was a baby, would stroke my nose from the top down to get me to sleep. And this, to this day, will make me fall asleep in an instant. Like, it doesn't matter who's even doing it. It could be a stranger and I'd be out.
This is on the internet now, Katie.
I know. Please don't stroke my nose. But... And things like reading excerpts from a book quietly and softly when you were a kid, trying to get you to sleep, I think that definitely calls back to the more voice triggers that Isabel pointed out.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely a connection there.
My equivalent of the nose was, it's always been the earlobe. Like if someone holds the earlobe and does that, the sort of smooshing lightly with the lobe, that is so relaxing that I will be asleep in a couple minutes. I have never really done it to myself, but when it's been done to you, different experience altogether. I'd say the only leftover thing that we haven't talked about for tingle inducing triggers is technically not part of tingle inducing. It's sort of its own thing, and that's the category of ambience. So, like you said earlier, Erin, the white noise sounds, those are very much ambience. A lot of people like to listen to raindrops. A lot of people I'd say that it's traditionally the sounds that you would hear in places like a spa or on a sound machine. Even those early tape recordings, I feel like a lot of sitcoms would go over trying to relax with a tape recording of the whale noises. Those all fall under ambience.
I remember very specifically Lizzie McGuire having one. And I don't know why it's so much in my mind, but that's all I can think about is Lizzie McGuire having a ocean sounds thing. And then that episode of Friends where Chandler is trying to stop smoking and he has the tape that's positive affirmations to himself.
One of the things I've always found really interesting that I've had since confirmed to me since looking into the research for it was that in 2018 there was a study that was conducted which addressed this long-term rumor that ASMR was possibly just a pseudoscience and something that we were all making up to say, oh, we're relaxed, but really it was a placebo. If we told ourselves we were feeling relaxed to it, we would be relaxed. But the results ended up showing for this study in 2018 that a group of people who identified that they received ASMR had lower heart rates, but they also had an increase in skin conductance, which that basically is saying that it increased arousal. And that's where I think a lot of issues sort of come in the ASMR community with sexualization of something that can be very innocent. But it's because as much as sexualization is bad for the ASMR community, there is this unspoken thing of some people can experience that type of, we'll call it skin conductance because I prefer to call it that in this setting. Yeah, there's people that experience it that way, and that's why it lends so well to those who choose to take ASMR and that approach.
I think that's kind of why, or part of the reason why ASMR became this big sort of pop culture sensation, is because it sort of had that underlying undercurrent of what people use ASMR for in some cases.
Also just because it's quite a private thing. And I think intimate is the word I was looking for. in that.
Intimate.
So like it probably like I guess would for some people have that similar like connotation. Like it's the same sort of part of their life. Like especially if people are doing it to like wind down before bed or whatever. It's like it makes sense. It's just a bit uncomfortable.
I think a really great way to transition from that topic is to actually go into. We have a topic for ASMR and pop culture. Now, one of the main people that I found came to mind when thinking about ASMR, just in the internet and circulating around out of context, was the channel Life with Mac. She is she was at the time, 13 years old, and she would create some real funny videos out of context where she like did role plays as like a flight attendant who was very rude and would like snatch your ticket from you and be like thank you. Or she like pretended to be like a police officer on the side of a road in a very fun attire that go her. She really committed to the role and I commend her for that. But the reason I mention her at this point is because she is actually someone who began to be sexualized by the platform, and it ended up resulting in her. I think all of her comments are turned off until she turns 18. But it was because she'd upload videos just of her like doing like a mukbang of something like honeycomb, and somehow I think people would report the video as like being sexually suggestive and whatnot. And it created quite an interesting topic where the mother of, I think her name's Mac's mother at the time, I think she spoke out against the platform saying, you don't need to censor my child when she's not doing anything that requires censorship.
Sort of like if you're
And
sexualizing a child, that's a you problem.
Yeah, there's your problem.
Very that.
I will say the police video in particular to me made me horrifically uncomfortable, because the video title was Sassy Police Officer Pulls You Over or something like that. And I just feel like the word sassy is interchanging the word probably sexy, because the way she was acting in it as well, and I can 100% see why YouTube took it down. I do believe that they have a responsibility to protect minors, and if that means getting it comes back to, do you get rid of the people that are sexualizing her, where there's probably a fair few, or do you just remove the video? That's your sort of discussion point.
It is like I don't know who this person is at all, but you guys sent me, just like as we were preparing this podcast, a screenshot of said video to the chat, and I was like, I am uncomfortable. Why does this person simultaneously look 12 and 35? Because like it was, I don't know.
That's a read.
But it was because like she was dressed in a costume that I don't know, especially like with that sort of title as well, that makes me feel like uncomfortable. Like
For sure.
I think it's because we like those types of costumes where you're like dressed up as like a police officer. I feel like those sort of are adult costumes that you'd see at like an adult fancy dress party. Whereas when I was like a child, I was always like, oh, I'm going to dress as like a ninja or like a Power Ranger or something like, and I feel like as much as, I think it's as we grow with the times, people are being exposed to new things at very young ages. And so they feel very mature all of a sudden. And I'm sure that was probably the case for Mac. She probably felt like there was nothing wrong with it because many girls her age are probably wearing worse. And then it also brings up the topic of
no, we're not gonna like
depth.
say that people wearing certain outfits are, you know, in any way asking for anything to happen, right?
No.
Or any sort of comment or whatever. But when it is a child that is being sexualized, the right thing to do is not, like, pretty much in every case, just to like remove child from situation, please, pronto.
Yeah. I think they made the right call in the end, because I don't think she's had any of the problems since, and I think she still has quite a lot of people that will watch her videos, but it's just because they want to watch her, not because they want to comment something that might trigger her in a negative light. Moving on from that, though, we have other people that found themselves in like the Twitterverse of everything. ASMR The Chew is another one, and she is this lovely lady who I think the most popular one that I remember seeing was her with like a bunch of pickles,
Pickles.
and she's just chewing a pickle and going, "Oh, this pickle's so good," and
I
for some
love it.
reason everyone really loved it, and I stand by that. Like, she's still one of those channels that I'll check in on every so often because I just like her.
She seems like such a sweet, wholehearted lady. Is that
Yeah.
fair to say? Her name's Spirit, and it just suits her so much. She's so sweet. I love her.
Has she been in drama, or was that just like a shout out?
No, just
No, that was just a fun shout
Okay,
out to her
cool.
existence.
if the pickle video went crazy, I feel like it
Very
had
viral.
millions of views, very viral. I'm surprised she hadn't seen it, to be quite honest.
Me, like under my rock, like under my amethyst rock.
Listening to your spiritual ASMR that you didn't know was ASMR.
Yeah.
I found myself recently getting caught in some videos that are like videos to watch at 2 a.m. or something. And it's a lot of like maybe some TikToks, things like that. But every so often I'll see some ASMR artists that are like sprinkled in. I find it's the ones that do like an audible whispering where like you're trying to make words, but you're not at the same time. The inaudible whispering has like appeared so many times as I think it's one of those videos that leaves it open for captions, me when I'm trying to like confess the truth or something but don't want to own up to it, stuff like that.
I'm just
I find
getting
those
very
videos
like
always appear.
Chamber of Secrets whispery parcel tongue. Like,
Very that's another thing that I've not even thought about before, like the parcel tongue, that whole sigh, that's ASMR. When you watch that scene and you got that little, that's ASMR, mama.
who knew I was such an enthusiast? Wow. Things I've learned about myself today.
So I discovered ASMR in 2014, which I think is pretty early. It was definitely
early.
still very weird, or perceived to be weird. Not a whole lot of people were speaking about it. It was a BuzzFeed article. I don't know what the article was, but it linked to Heather Feather's video where it was 15 different triggers. And I remember she had this like glass goblet holder that was filled with small gravel, and it had a candle in it.
Oh.
And then she had this little wooden spoon, and she like just ever so gently mixed the gravel with the spoon. And for some reason, it was just the most relaxing thing that I had ever come across. And I kind of kept going back to it, and I kept trying to find. I had a problem where I thought it was called AMSR. So every time I could put it into every time I put it into YouTube, I couldn't find anything, and I'd be like, "What? I was told this was a thing," until I figured it out. But I used it mostly. I discovered it when I was quite unwell, and I used it a lot for sort of pain relief in a way, or to sort of being able to sleep through certain bad points. And especially if I was feeling particularly anxious, I would just pop something on and it would just sort of ebb away. And to be honest, that's exactly what I use it for today. I don't particularly use it for sleep much anymore. It's more like it's a daytime activity.
We're actively engaged.
Actively engaged, yeah. I fall asleep in silence now. I don't listen to it to fall asleep to, which I think I'm an oddball in that sense.
I would say I'm on the opposite side to you, where I do often use it to fall asleep because it's just such a nice thing to like. When I put on an ASMR video, my brain recognizes the pattern that sleep time's about to happen and you better buckle up and listen well because it's coming. I discovered ASMR, I'd say around similar times, maybe 2015, 2016. I wasn't like too late to the party, but I also wasn't like very at the beginning with those first whispers that appeared. I don't recall the first thing that I ever heard that was like an ASMR video, but one thing that I do remember is, I don't know if you guys heard this, but there was like a 3D barbershop like experience that I don't see. You guys can't see this, but the faces I got on the Zoom call were very so I'm gonna take that as a no. But this barbershop experience, it's not necessarily ASMR in the traditional sense of the videos that I started consuming to get into it to fall asleep. But this one was like a 3D experience where you can hear like the barber move around the shop around you. And it also has like a little bit of a creepy ending to it where like I think he's very distant for most of it, and then he just suddenly appears in your ear at the end to say something suggestive, and then it cuts off. But for the most part, I would say that I use ASMR as a way of falling asleep, a way of calming myself down, especially when like you get a couple of anxious thoughts. It's just really nice to listen to something that can take the edge off of that and bring you back down and make you feel a bit grounded.
It's almost escapism in a way. When you are starting to feel a bit anxious, you can sort of click it on and suddenly you don't have to pay attention to your anxious thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sort of like, in terms of like if I'm doing like a guided meditation or something, like it's very much just like trying to find a way to direct my thoughts and energy by like sort of like putting the blinkers on and just being like, this is what I'm doing right now. It makes it easier to relax because it's like taking up the brain space of whatever it was you were anxious about before.
As for like the future of ASMR, I think that I have like a couple of hopes for what I hope it will become. I've seen a few videos where like instead of going to like get a massage, these people have like guided ASMR in person where you'll be blindfolded and like they'll give you things to like touch, they'll like make noises around you, and it'll be a very relaxing setting, much like a massage. But I don't always want to go for a massage, so this seems like something I'd love to happen more in the future. And then another thing that I'd like is when I was going through a bit of insomnia to start with, and I like went to the doctor, the first response for them was to recommend like a medication. And I'm a bit hesitant with most medications because I feel like there's always like some type of side effect that isn't spoken about until you start taking it, and then you go back and talk about what you're feeling and they're like, oh yeah, that is a side effect. But I would love it if in some way doctors could be a bit more proactive in their suggestions of ASMR, not just through like Headspace or Calm, because I think they do well, but there's a huge variety of things out there that make it like entertainment as well, and they can really widen the experience more so than just what's offered on those types of apps. So in some ways I'd love it if like we could find a way as a people to recommend ASMR.
I'm sure it would have to do something with like the curation of if the doctor was going to recommend that you experience some ASMR and you go look up these videos, I feel like they would have to be narrowed down and curated in a way that the weird, odd ones that are likely to drive people away from it would maybe be restricted and then they could go and explore it if they wanted to.
Like an NHS approved programme.
Yeah.
Like the Couch to 5K of ASMR. Actually.
I mean, we'll write a proposal. We'll see what NHS Scotland has to say. Maybe it'll work out.
I mean, I could provide many.
Okay, do you have any hopes for what you hope ASMR will be in the future?
I would say, now this one is a bit irrational in the fact that I want it gone in the first place. But do you know like the overly clickbaity thumbnails that you get?
Oh yeah.
And it's like, or just clickbaity videos in general where it's like world record fastest ASMR. I'm sure there are people out there that experience ASMR from fast ASMR where it's aggressive and loud and fast, like too much, yeah. But it seems to just be that when you type in ASMR, like all of the popular videos are these ones where it's fast and aggressive and the thumbnails are all overly overly photoshopped and just, it's not what I'm there for, and it irrationally annoys me. So if there was a way where I could not have to wade through all of that to get to the videos that are actually nice, then I would love that.
If there was just a way to go off of even these like 9 categories that Isabel has created, like that would be a great way to just separate everything. But I suppose that take a lot of time to go through all the videos to eventually get them all in. But you know, never say never. We don't know how organization will go in the future.
And I was going to say, it's like YouTube start doing like editorial playlists like Spotify and that. They're like, our top 10
role plays
tingles.
of the month.
Top 10 tapping sounds.
Yeah,
But then the clickbaity like element of it is always just going to be like, that's how people manage to get attention via the YouTube
Algorithms. Yeah.
Which is annoying, but
I mean, Erin, now that you know what ASMR is with a bit more detail, what are your hopes for the future?
well, I feel like I have a clearer understanding of what ASMR actually is, because I really genuinely like thought it was just like more of a genre. Like I didn't realise it was so sensory. So I feel like I kind of want to like have a shot, like see what it's like properly. Like obviously we have discovered that I'm maybe like somehow partaking in the ASMR without knowing or actively trying. So I want to like give it a good bash, a good shot. And then I don't know, maybe we'll end up in a world where we're all getting those sensory experiences and it's going to be fun. We're all feeling a lot more chill. Okay, so now that we've had like a little run through the whole ASMR, the do's, the don'ts, the things that we knew, the things that we learned, I might go and give it a little bash myself. I'll maybe give you guys a little update on the social medias about Erin tries ASMR. Little fun video. It's a fun time. I'm going to wrap it up for today there. So firstly, I would like to say thank you very much to Miss Editor, Sound Engineer, Sound Designer Extraordinaire, Katie Spence Audio for coming on.
Thank you
so much, Katie Spence Audio.
Your time.
Please always be Katie Spence Audio.
Please do contact Katie if you have any songs you need mixed, mastered, podcasts you want edited, all that kind of jazz. Katie can probably do it. She's a master of all the trades. But yeah, well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the It's Not Always Dark podcast. I've been your host, Erin. You've had Kieran and Katie on as well. And we will catch you next week. Bye.